I'm glad to share with you some stuff about pasture species selection. There's really no magic bullet of a grass or a legume that can really stand for everything. That because I think that pastures really get abused quite frequently, and I think if we just learn to read our pastures and see what they uh, are trying to tell us by the way we're treating them, we can make them a lot more productive. So um, for the next slide here, um, so first of all, you should take a look at your pasture and see, what plants are already there, and ask why. And if you can see what grasses are there, um, and if you like those grasses, there's probably uh, that's probably a good reason to go with that grass that's there. So the question is why are those plants there? Is it a factor of how you're managing it? Is it due to the soils that are there? Is it really heavy soil? Is it a wet soil? All those kinds of things that you can take a look at and see if you know the grasses that do well there. Why do they do well? Is it because of water availability? Do you have seasonal water? And there's a lot of things that you can learn from just seeing what species are already in your pasture. The other thing is you can take the same approach to see what weeds are there and why. So in this particular pasture, this is a meadow foxtail, and it's really quite a good grass. And the reason why it's there is because it's wet. It likes wet soils. So if you can figure out why a certain plant is there, if it's due to compaction, then you can try to correct the compaction problem. And not very often is a weedy pasture due to a poor species selection. And so some of the things besides compaction that can be changed is, if you overwater it, if you underwater it, if you just plain manage it poorly and neglect it. So, and another thing is when you're looking at what pastures or what species you want to select for a pasture, you want to ask yourself, well, what's my end goal? Do you want it to look like a lawn, or do you want it to really kick out a lot of forage? Do you just mostly care about it looking good? Do you have other goals? This picture is of me planting a pasture where the owner had some bees, and it got a little exciting because the beekeeper was there when I pulled in to do some replanting. And I mentioned that because they had an alternative goal or a parallel goal for their pasture. And so you can think of what do you want to, or why do you have this pasture? Is it because you have one thing in mind, or there are several things that it can accomplish? And then ask why, or ask what animals you're going to be grazing. Is it going to be something that needs a lot of forage value? It needs to, or is it just need to be something that fills their gut? Are there? We all know that horses are really hard on pastures. Can we come in and graze with horses and then bring cattle in to clean up after the horses? Is there some way that I can complement my grazing practices with a variety of animals? on this picture here, this is what some people might call a pasture, but is it really a pasture? I mean, it's basically a corral that has some weeds growing in it. Um, so in this picture here, you can see that we got good establishment in the pasture, but also there were a lot of grassy weeds that came along with it. So be sure that your weeds are controlled, and especially if you're going to try and plant a mixture of legumes or something, so that and that will kind of limit your herbicide options if you have a mixture of grasses and legumes. So make sure that your weeds are controlled, and one of the big ways of doing that is to change the way you manage the pasture. So and then if you just decide, hey, let's plant the grasses, the broadleaf forages, legumes can be interseeded later. So and then once you get to get your pasture established, take care of it. Think of it as an investment of what something that you've put some time into and a lot of money. So make sure and take care of it. So let's talk about some of the grass pasture species. And there's really no absolutes here. Some of the dryland grasses can kind of be an intermediate between irrigated and dryland, but some of these listed here are under the irrigated part are really good grasses that will help. And the main thing here is to decide what grasses are there and why. So you see Timothy there. That's kind of a popular one for horses, and you've got to make sure that you understand the growth habits of Timothy in order for it to survive. And so with Timothy as an example, it grows by having a culm at the base of the plant, and and that culm is really nice and juicy and really quite tasty to animals that graze it. But if you damage that culm, it will not survive. And so you've got to make sure and graze it in a way that if you want to have the Timothy there, you've got to make sure that you're going to manage it the way that it needs to be managed. Otherwise, you might as well not plant it. So another one there is perennial ryegrass. Perennial ryegrass is a really good grass for quick establishment. So you could put it in a grass seed mix just for the quick establishment, but you'd probably want to put it in only like 10% or something. And then the other ones there are kind of your workhorse species. Tall fescue is a great grass, but animals don't really like it. If it's the only one there, they'll eat it, but they don't like it because it's kind of rough, but got a lot of hair on the leaves. So so you kind of have to decide, well, I want tall fescue in there because it can handle a lot of abuse, but I don't want it to become the dominant grass in my pasture. So maybe you put that in at like 10%. So let's move on to the dryland ones. There's a lot of different grasses listed here, but when you look at in a dryland situation, you need to decide how dry is it, and try to match those grasses to your site. you know, if you've got something that's extremely dry, you should probably go with the crested or Siberian wheatgrass. If it's, let's say it's in Cache Valley, you get a little bit of more rain here than, say, western Box Elder County. Then you could use some of the like orchard grass and maybe smooth brome grass. It just depends on how dry is it, how wet is it. You can use a lot of different things to try to determine what grasses you want to put in pasture. So the next one here are the legumes, and so you've got an irrigated pasture with a lot of, and this list here is certainly not all inclusive. There are a lot of legumes that you could use to plant in a pasture, and with some of them you have to be careful because they will bloat or will cause your animals to bloat. And then, like for example, with bird's foot trefoil, they're a non-bloating legume, so you could use bird's foot trefoil, but there's also some difficulties that come with bird's foot trefoil. So, and the same with dryland. There's a lot of different species that you can use for a dryland pasture, and in the same with the grasses, you can kind of decide, well, how dry is it, and what species do I need to use to try to find a good species for my pasture. So in my last slide here, I've got some resources that you can go to for finding grasses that will fit, and legumes, and a lot of other species. In the Intermountain Planting Guide that was put together by guys here at the Forage and Range Lab in the Ag Research Service. That is a really helpful guide. It will give you seeding rates and recommendations for planting, and it's a really good resource. Also, you can talk to your seed companies, and they'll help you out quite a bit with things that they have, and they know what seeds will work for a lot of situation. And the other two pictures here that I have are these field guides that I found. They came out of Saskatchewan, and they're a field ID and a guidebook, and I really like them, mostly for identification, but they have a lot of good things in there that are helpful to help you decide what grasses you want to use for your pasture. So that's all I've got. Are there any questions?
Not so far. Just a reminder, guys, when you have any questions or anything, please put them in the chat. Okay, here we go. We got a question. This is from Kalen. He's our extension faculty in Millard County. He says, when talking dryland legumes, how much annual precip is needed to effectively grow those?
Good question. And so if you go back to, I quit sharing my screen, but the forage kochia and some of those small burnet and yellow flower alfalfa, they can really handle some pretty dry conditions, and sandfoin as well. But that's in that reference, the Intermountain Planting Guide. It will give you information on what precip range they need to be in for them to do well. So
perfect.
I see a question here about meadow brome grass and orchard grass. Those all of those that you mentioned in that question are a really good mix that I like to use for kind of a not extremely dry situation, but I, I like to use those for something that's kind of in the 17-inch precip zone. And orchard grass, you want to use one that is in a dry land, kind of developed for dry land like Paiute. And Western wheatgrass is, let me think here. Slender and Western wheatgrass are both good grasses for especially establishment. Slender wheatgrass kind of fits in the same category as the perennial ryegrass, where it's good to help you get started, but eventually that's going to kind of die out, and so it's good for establishing a pasture. So do your research on what varieties are good for kind of that intermediate range. Let's see, next question. What planting methods do you recommend for irrigated? One of the biggest things there is what your seed bed like. If mostly, if at all possible, use a drill with oh shoot, I forget the word, the wheels on the back, press wheels. Use something that's going to press that seed into the ground. But if you've got a really nice seed bed and you feel confident about broadcasting, you can broadcast it and then harrow it in and roll it. And that's the main thing there is seed to soil contact. And if you just broadcast it on the ground, you don't get a really good seed soil contact. So there's a lot of ways of getting that seed soil contact to work, and you can, sometimes people don't have a lot of different equipment available for those seeding situations, so try to use something that works. So,
and then I see one more question down here. How much does elevation play into the grasses, and is there a variety that is superior?
For elevation, I think that depends on the grass, like, and maybe it's more of a temperature issue. But let's take Timothy, for example. It likes cool, climates. And I think the elevation kind of plays into that a little bit. But there's a lot of factors that go into that. And as far as a variety, that also depends on your situation. It can be variable with what kind of water you have available, all that kind of stuff. So curly cup gumweed, there's a lot of really good herbicides that you can use that would take care of that, and I would, depending on what other weeds you have, you could use a spray like a Weed Master, which is 2,4-D, and dicamba, and you want to get those when they're small. Do them, get it sprayed early so that you're spraying it when it's going to be effective. So the last question here is, after planting, how long should I wait before grazing? That also depends on how much water you have and how well it's established. So what I like to do is I like to kind of take my hand and pretend like I'm going to be grazing and grab a hold of that plant. And if I grab a hold of that plant like a livestock's mouth would, and that plant pulls up out of the ground, then you're going to be too early. So um, you've got to get out there and just take a look at it. But yeah, there's just go out there and pretend you're a cow and you're going to be grazing, and if it seems like it's going to hold up, you can go ahead and graze it. But you've got to plan on, a couple of months at least. So the other thing is make sure and let that grass get up to, don't graze it down below 4 inches before you take your cows off. So anyway, we have time for one more.
Yeah, let's do one more and then we'll move on to the next one. So let me read it for you. So maybe there'll be a better time for this question, but I can't find a no-till seed drill that I can use. I'm in Lehigh. Any suggestions?
I found that a conventional drill, depending on your soil conditions, can work really well. I think that if you've got to try and take care of your soil especially if you're trying to reestablish a pasture. So if you've got animals out on your pasture right now where it's frozen and they're out there walking on it, trampling on it, your pasture's taking a beating. So you can use a conventional drill if you don't have access to a conventional drill. That's going to be tough because it all depends on your soil conditions. You could try waiting, and if you have good weed control, try waiting for season like late in the fall, and you could broadcast it out there and just make sure and take care of it during the winter. Don't put animals out on it. So
Perfect. Well, thanks, Michael. We appreciate you presenting today.